Chapter 4 Cranston and Cranston. Lamont Cranston woke up and wondered why his head still whirled. It took him about half a minute to learn that the motion came from the fact that he was riding in his limousine, which didn't make sense at first, because the last thing Cranston remembered, he'd been out of his car watching Glencoe's mansion go up in one great blanket of flame. Slowly, reflectively, Cranston nodded. Someone must have put him back in the limousine and Stanley was driving him home. He didn't have to guess who had helped him on the way, for at that moment Cranston heard a low-toned laugh beside him. He turned to see the black-cloaked figure of the Shadow.
"What did you hit me with?" asked Cranston. "All four of your automatics?"
"I'm only carrying one pair tonight," replied the Shadow. "And they were inside my cloak when I tossed you in the car. Your head must have struck the opposite door."
"A bit overzealous, weren't you?"
"Hardly. A chap was aiming at you with a revolver. I had to send you away fast, which I did, so rapidly that he thought you turned into me." Cranston chuckled at the Shadow's statement. "That's quite all right," declared Cranston. "A lot of people think they've seen me become the Shadow." "And others," added the Shadow, "are quite sure that I have become Lamont Cranston. But no one knows that there are two of us. No one except the two of us." The big car was rolling along a country road. Cranston was surprised to note that it was the highway leading to his New Jersey estate. Calculating the distance from Glencoe's, Cranston realized he'd been out of circulation quite a while. "That fellow who was taking a shot at me?" inquired Cranston reminiscently. "Who was he?" "His name was Kerthel," replied the Shadow. "He worked for the Hydra. I was trailing him from the last case, the only lead I had. I didn't know that crime was due at Glencoe's, otherwise I'd have gone there in place of you. The Hydra is assuming larger proportions than I expected."
"You mean this Hydra business is on the level?"
demanded Cranston.
"Why, I thought it was just another of Commissioner Weston's pipe dreams."
It was the Shadow's turn to laugh, which he did, though his low-throbbed tone lacked mirth. "Frankly, Cranston," stated the Shadow, "I classed those recent crimes as individual cases. One night when I was you, I told Weston that they seemed the work of a group with multiple heads, like a Hydra. I simply wanted to stir our friend, the Commissioner, to furnish more cooperation from the law."
"But I struck the thing right on the head, or heads."
"There is a Hydra, and tonight its work was managed by a head named Willard Mance. That fire was of incendiary origin, intended to cover a big robbery. It finished by masking murder as well. Edmund Glencoe is dead, slain by the man he called his best friend, Willard Mance." For the rest of the ride Cranston sat in stupefied silence, knowing both Mance and Glencoe. He wouldn't have deemed the thing possible but for the fact of his own narrow escape from the death at the hands of Kerthel. Cranston was still pondering deeply when the car pulled up in front of his own sizable residence. "After you, Cranston," undertoned the Shadow. "Only one of us can go in the house openly. I shall meet you in the trophy room." Going up the front steps of his house, Cranston looked over his shoulder, hoping to catch some token of the Shadow's exit from the limousine. All that Cranston saw was blackness, thick within the car, and likewise on the ground where the car had been after Stanley swung the limousine around the corner of the garage. Meeting servants inside the house, Cranston was detained a few minutes before he went upstairs, as he had to inquire about phone calls during his absence, particularly because some might be of importance to his friend the Shadow. At last Cranston reached the second floor and opened the door of the trophy room. Lamont Cranston found himself. Seated in a comfortable armchair, languidly smoking one of Cranston's favorite cigars, was his double. Feature for feature, pose for pose, the man in the chair was Lamont Cranston. Actually, he was the Shadow, who, through perfect makeup and long practice, had become as much Cranston as himself. This had been going on for years, so it should have been perfect. But when Cranston thought back to the time when he had first met the Shadow as himself, he remembered that the impersonation had been flawless even then. "I suppose I owe you an apology, Cranston," declared the Shadow, even in his friend's own calm tone. "When I first decided to supplant you, it was purely because you were away from home for such long periods. It was very convenient to be someone who wouldn't show up for a year or more." "No fault of mine that I came back to stay," returned Cranston. "Globe-trotting is an obsolete sport nowadays with world conditions as they are. However, I still enjoy our little game. I've made a lot of real friends through you." "And enemies, perhaps." "Plenty of enemies," laughed Cranston, "but they haven't been permanent. You seem to have the habit of writing them off." The Shadow joined in Cranston's laugh. It was singular how their tones blended into a single voice. When the mutual mirth ended, it was the Shadow who remarked, "Speaking of friends, Cranston, you have made a few for me, one in particular." "Margot Lane," interrupted Cranston. "I knew we'd get around to her, but how did I know that I was going to meet her on the Caribbean cruise I took? How could I guess that she would run into you at a nightclub 2 days after we landed? Naturally, she mistook you for me. I even would myself if I could forget who I am. Anyway, you found Margot useful." "Very useful," agreed the Shadow. "Whenever trouble is coming up, I know it from the way Margot gets into it. It's a wonder she didn't get tangled in this Hydra business." The Shadow had risen from his chair. He was strolling the room in slow, easy fashion, watching his double. Cranston caught the mood and began a stroll of his own. He came face to face with the Shadow in a doorway and waited for his impersonator to speak. When the Shadow did, his voice came from behind Cranston's shoulder. "When did you install the door mirror?" asked the Shadow. "You should have told me that you were having the trophy room remodeled." Cranston spun away from his own reflection. His face showed blank surprise as it met the Shadow's, who copied the expression to show Cranston that he'd missed what he'd missed by not continuing to watch the mirror. Finding his wits again, Cranston gestured around the room. "I had the place repapered," he explained. "I'd forgotten about the mirror. It was fitted only a few days ago." "Where have you put your rifles?" asked the Shadow, studying the blank wall. "In the gun room?" Cranston nodded. "I think I'll leave them there," he said. "There won't be room for them when the trophies are hung. Of course, I'll keep the cup cabinet here." He pointed to a corner where a huge cabinet showed shelves that were laden with dozens of cups, all tributes to Cranston's skill as a sportsman. The Shadow smiled when he noted that one shelf was devoted to the trophies that he, the Shadow, had personally won during the times when Cranston was away. Nice of Cranston to arrange a special Shadow shelf. "Keep me posted on all changes," suggested the Shadow. "I might come home while you are out and find myself a trifle confused. By the way, you hired a new houseman lately. What is his name?" "Kendrick," replied Cranston. "He always answers the door, so you'll probably meet him if you forget your passkey. A rather stolid chap, but capable." The Shadow raised his hand in interruption. He could hear slow footsteps coming up the front stairs. Plucking his hat and cloak from a chair, the Shadow passed them to Cranston and gestured toward the door with the mirror. "Step in the closet a moment," suggested the Shadow. "That might be Kendrick coming upstairs. Because the footsteps are new to me, I might as well get acquainted with him while I'm here." A big surprise was due. What caused it was the fact that the Shadow was totally off guard. He had to be so because he was posing as Cranston. There wasn't any reason for Cranston to be alert, or even abrupt, when opening the door of the trophy room to admit an arriving servant. Since the Shadow was playing the part of Cranston, he opened the door in most deliberate style. Then the Shadow's hands were rising, shoulder high. The back steps that he took were forced upon him by the pressure of a revolver muzzle planted squarely in his chest. And the stare that the Shadow gave was Cranston's blank one. that he had imitated only a few minutes earlier. The man behind the gun was the murderer who had tricked the Shadow at Glencoe's. Not satisfied with the exploit, Willard Mance had sprung another clever stroke, linking the Shadow with Lamont Cranston, the belated guest who had come to Glencoe's home. The Hydra head was here for a final showdown.